Disclaimer before the story begins. Some parts of this story may be disturbing for younger audiences. Listener discretion is advised, and if you enjoy these terrifying true encounters and dark wartime mysteries, don't forget to subscribe for more chilling stories like this one. During the height of World War II, when fear and uncertainty stretched across every continent, a small detachment of American soldiers received orders unlike any they had ever heard before. They weren't being sent to the front lines in Europe, nor to the Pacific jungles where battles raged with blood and fire. Instead, their assignment led them deep into the quiet wilderness of the Appalachian Mountains. It seemed strange to them. Why would soldiers be stationed in such an isolated rural region, far from the war? Their mission briefing was vague, deliberately so. They were told only that an old prison, long abandoned by the state, had been requisitioned by the military and required guarding. It was supposed to be a simple post, keep watch, maintain a presence, and ensure no unauthorized persons entered the facility. No explanation was given as to why the prison mattered, and none of the men dared ask too many questions. The journey there was unnerving in itself. For miles, their trucks rattled along narrow mountain roads, twisting through dense forests where the trees loomed high, their branches interlocked like skeletal hands blotting out the sun. The deeper they went, the quieter the world became. Birds stopped singing. The rustle of animals in the underbrush grew rarer until only the grinding of the truck engines broke the silence. By the time they reached the edge of the prison grounds, the men already felt a weight pressing on them, something in the air that made their skin crawl. The facility loomed at the end of a cracked road, surrounded by a towering iron fence topped with barbed wire. The gates, once sturdy, now sagged under the weight of rust and time. Behind them, the prison itself rose like a stone giant. Its walls were blackened with moss, its windows shattered or boarded up, and its towers leaned as though the earth itself had tried to push them away. The soldiers climbed down from their trucks, their boots crunching on the gravel. None of them spoke at first. They simply stared up at the hulking structure. It wasn't just old, it was menacing. The kind of building that looked alive, as if it were watching them. One of the privates, a young man barely in his 20s, muttered under his breath, "This place doesn't want us here." His voice trembled, though he tried to laugh it off when the others looked at him. Their commanding officer barked an order to cut the chains on the gates. As the metal snapped, the sound echoed far louder than it should have, bouncing across the trees and returning to them like a warning. The men pushed the gates open, their hinges groaning like something in pain. At that moment, a sudden cold wind rushed past them, carrying with it the faint smell of rot and damp stone. One of the soldiers pulled his jacket tighter, glancing at the sky. It was summer, yet the air around the prison felt like late autumn. As they stepped inside the courtyard, their radios crackled with static. The lieutenant tapped his set, frowning. They should have had a clear signal up here in the mountains. But all he got was broken fragments, like whispers fading in and out. One private, scanning the upper windows of the prison, suddenly froze. "Sir," he whispered. The others followed his gaze. For just a moment, in one of the shattered windows of the North Tower, there was a shape, a figure, standing still, watching them. The soldiers raised their rifles, their hearts pounding. But when the officer shouted a command and stormed forward, the figure was gone. The window was empty, only shards of broken glass reflecting the gray sky. They searched the tower, but found nothing. "Probably just a trick of the light," the lieutenant muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Still, the squad pressed on, moving deeper into the courtyard. The place seemed to absorb sound, swallowing their footsteps and whispers. Each man felt the same thing, but dared not admit it aloud. The prison was waiting for them. By the time they reached the main doors, heavy slabs of iron and wood reinforced with bolts, the dread had only deepened. The hinges screamed as they pushed the doors open, revealing the yawning darkness beyond. A stench wafted out, damp, mold, and something else, something sharp and putrid that made their stomachs tighten. One soldier gagged and pulled his sleeve across his mouth. "God, it smells like something died in there," he said. The officer stepped across the threshold first, lantern in hand. The beam cut through the dark and revealed a vast entryway lined with cracked stone floors, peeling paint, and long-forgotten furniture draped in dust. The silence inside was crushing, broken only by the faint drip of water somewhere deep within. The men followed, their boots echoing too loudly in the space. As the last soldier stepped inside, the heavy doors behind them slammed shut on their own. The sound reverberated like a cannon blast, and every man spun around, weapons raised. The officer rushed back to the door and tried to push it open, but it wouldn't budge. The chains they had cut moments ago were now wrapped tightly across the gates once more, as if the prison itself had sealed them in. A long silence followed. Then faintly from somewhere above them came the sound of a voice. Not loud, not clear, but soft, almost like a whisper. It spoke one of their names. The whisper still hung in the air, faint but undeniable. It wasn't a trick of the wind, nor the creak of old stone. It was a voice, a human voice, that spoke one of the soldiers' names with chilling clarity. The men froze in place, their eyes darting to one another. None of them dared speak. The silence that followed was heavier than before, pressing down on their chests until even breathing seemed too loud. Finally, the lieutenant broke the tension with a sharp command. "Spread out, check the ground floor. We don't yet know who or what is in here." His voice was firm, but beneath it, there was an unease he couldn't disguise. The squad fanned out, their rifles raised, the beams of their lanterns cutting thin slices through the suffocating dark. The prison seemed to groan with every step, the old structure shifting as if reacting to their presence. Dust fell from the rafters in small puffs, and the faint echo of their boots bounced back at them in ways that didn't feel natural. Sometimes the echo came too late, like footsteps trailing just a moment behind. Private Harris, the youngest in the unit, kept glancing over his shoulder. He swore he could feel someone walking just behind him, but every time he spun around there was only the endless hallway, its walls slick with moisture. His breathing quickened and he muttered a quiet prayer under his breath. The squad regrouped at the center of the entryway after sweeping the lower halls. Nothing, no intruders, no evidence of anyone having been there for years. And yet, the feeling persisted. Someone or something was watching. It was Sergeant Miller who finally spoke what they were all thinking. "Sir," he said, his deep voice trembling just slightly, "we shouldn't be here. This place it sits wrong." Before the lieutenant could respond, another sound pierced the stillness. It came from deep inside the prison, echoing down the corridors in a drawn-out wail of agony. It wasn't a soldier's voice. It was too raw, too tortured. Every man stiffened, their blood running cold. Without hesitation, the lieutenant barked, "Move," and they rushed toward the source of the scream. Their boots thundered across the cracked stone, rifles raised, lanterns swaying wildly as they plunged deeper into the prison's bowels. The corridors twisted like a labyrinth with rusted bars lining each side. Cells stretched into darkness, their iron doors hanging open like gaping mouths. Inside, the remnants of decay lingered. Old mattresses crawling with mold, shackles bolted to the walls, stains on the floors that no amount of time could wash away. The scream came again. Closer now, sharp enough to make one of the soldiers flinch and nearly drop his rifle. They stopped at a junction, their lights flickering as if the prison itself were breathing around them. "This way," the lieutenant ordered, pointing toward the left corridor. They advanced, their nerves stretched taut until they came upon a cell whose door had been warped outward, as though something immense had tried to break free. The scream had ended, but the silence that followed felt worse. Harris stepped closer to the cell, his lantern trembling in his hand. He aimed the light inside and nearly dropped it. There were claw marks, deep gouges raked across the stone walls, running from floor to ceiling. Something or someone had torn at the prison with inhuman strength. "Jesus," Harris whispered. "No man could have done this." Another soldier pointed to the floor. There were drag marks, dark streaks cutting across the stone, leading out of the cell and deeper into the prison. Whatever had been inside had not only escaped, but had taken something or someone with it. The lieutenant clenched his jaw. "Stay sharp, we follow." Reluctantly, the squad pressed on, lanterns shaking as they followed the marks. Each step seemed heavier than the last. The air grew colder, their breath beginning to fog. One by one, the men realized something that none of them wanted to say aloud. The prison was no longer empty. When they reached the next corridor, the stench hit them. It was stronger than before, thick and rotten, coating their throats. One soldier gagged and covered his mouth. Ahead, at the end of the hallway, the drag marks stopped at another cell. This one was sealed shut with thick iron bars, but behind it, there was movement. Lanterns swung forward, illuminating the interior. For a moment, none of the men could comprehend what they were seeing. Something crouched in the shadows. Its form was vaguely human but twisted, elongated, hunched over like a beast. Its skin was pale and stretched tight over its bones, and when it turned toward the light, its eyes glowed faintly in the dark. The soldiers froze. No one spoke, no one breathed. Then, with a sudden lunge, the thing hurled itself against the bars. The sound was deafening, the metal rattling violently as the creature's face pressed through the gaps. Its mouth opened in a grotesque snarl, revealing rows of jagged teeth. A guttural, inhuman sound rumbled from its throat. "Open fire," the lieutenant shouted. The corridor erupted with gunfire. Bullets slammed into the cells, sparks flying as they ricocheted off iron. The creature shrieked, its scream echoing through the halls in a sound so unnatural it made their skin crawl. But when the smoke cleared and the ringing in their ears faded, the cell was empty. The bars still rattled. The claw marks on the floor were fresh. The lieutenant's hands trembled as he reloaded his weapon. His men looked to him for answers, but for once he had none. Whatever haunted this prison, it wasn't human. The gunfire still echoed, long after their rifles had fallen silent. Spent shells clinked to the stone floor, rolling into the dust, while smoke from their muzzles lingered in the damp air. Every man's chest heaved, lungs burning as though the walls themselves were squeezing the breath from them. The cell was empty. Not a trace of the creature remained. No body, no blood, nothing but claw marks, gouged freshly into the stone and iron bars that rattled as if shaken by unseen hands. "Sir," Miller whispered, his voice hoarse, "we all saw it. That wasn't it wasn't a man." The lieutenant gritted his teeth, sweat sliding down his temple despite the cold that clung to the air. "Whatever it was, it's gone. We still regroup and find the exit." But the men knew better. They could feel the weight of something still there, lurking in the shadows. The silence pressed in tighter, heavy as chains. Somewhere deep inside the prison, a low groan rolled through the walls. Not quite stone, not quite air, but something alive. They began moving again, following the lieutenant's orders, though their steps were hesitant now. Every lantern flickered as though resisting the darkness, their weak beams barely carving through the corridors. Harris's hands shook so violently he could barely keep his rifle steady. "This isn't set right," he muttered under his breath. "This place, it's Seps watching us." No one corrected him. No one laughed it off. They all felt it too. The deeper they went, the more the prison seemed to twist around them. Hallways that should have led back to the entrance stretched further into the dark, bending in ways that defied logic. They passed the same cell block twice. At least, they thought it was the same. The rust on the bars, the mold on the walls, the faint stains of something dark smeared across the stone. It all looked identical, repeating like a nightmare loop. "Sir," another soldier said, "we sit going in circles." The lieutenant stopped to check his compass. Holding it in the lantern light, the needle spun wildly, twitching back and forth as though the prison itself rejected direction. His jaw tightened, and he snapped the compass shut. "We keep moving." But every step forward only made the air heavier. The stench grew worse, clinging to their uniforms, burning their throats. One soldier coughed into his sleeve and came away with blood on his arm. His eyes widened, but he said nothing. Then came the whisper again. This time, it didn't call just one name. It called several. The voices were layered, overlapping, as though dozens of mouths spoke at once. And worse, it came from inside the prison walls. "Who's there?" Miller roared, his rifle jerking up as he spun toward the sound. The walls seemed to pulse, the whispers swelling, pressing against their ears, until one of the men dropped his rifle and clutched his head, screaming. His lantern smashed against the floor. plunging half the squad into deeper darkness. "Hold him up! Don't let him fall behind!" the lieutenant shouted, but his voice cracked with panic. They dragged the soldier to his feet, but his eyes rolled back in his head. His lips moved, mumbling words that weren't his own. They sounded old, guttural, like a language none of them should have known. When he finally screamed again, it wasn't his voice at all. The sound rattled through the corridor like thunder, and then the lights went out. Every lantern, every flicker of flame, snuffed out in an instant. The men were swallowed whole by the dark, so complete that they couldn't even see the rifles in their hands. Breathing filled the silence. Not theirs, something else. Something big, slow, wet, drawing closer. "Light it! Light the damn lamp!" someone yelled, fumbling with trembling hands. Matches struck in the dark, sparks flaring, and then finally flame. The light revealed the corridor, just for an instant. And in that instant, something vast and pale slithered out of sight at the edge of the glow. Harris dropped his lantern, his face drained of color. "No," he whispered, backing away. "No, no, no." The lieutenant raised his rifle. "Steady yourselves," but steadiness was impossible. The corridor stretched unnaturally long, the shadows crawling closer with each heartbeat. The whispers returned, louder, almost mocking, as if the prison itself laughed at their terror. Then came the sound. Metal scraping stone, heavy, dragging steps, and finally at the far end of the corridor, two glowing eyes, watching. The men raised their weapons, their fear now teetering on the edge of madness. But before they could fire, the eyes blinked and vanished. Only silence remained. The lieutenant lowered his rifle slightly, sweat dripping down his chin. We keep moving," he said, his voice hollow. But inside, each man knew the truth. There was no moving forward. They weren't exploring anymore. They were prey, and the prison was the hunter. The silence that followed was worse than the whispers. It wasn't emptiness. No, it was the sound of something listening, waiting. The soldiers stood frozen, rifles raised, lantern light trembling across their pale faces. Each man's breath came fast, loud, too loud. In a place like this, even the sound of their hearts felt like a signal flare. "Eyes open," the lieutenant muttered, though his own voice betrayed the strain in his throat. The corridor stretched endlessly, black and suffocating. The lanterns only lit a small circle of ground, everything else pressing in like a living wall. And then one of the soldiers gasped. The stone floor beneath their boots rippled, just slightly, as if the rock itself were breathing. Before anyone could react, the soldier at the rear of the column was yanked off his feet with a cry that was cut short. His rifle clattered against the wall, echoing down the passage. By the time they spun around, his body was already gone, dragged screaming into the black. "Miller!" someone shouted. Where the hell did he go?" No answer, just his scream, growing faint, swallowed by the labyrinth. The squad broke. Lanterns swung wildly, their glow cutting brief arcs into the dark. One man fired into the shadows, the gunfire exploding like thunder. The flash of his muzzle lit stone, bars, dust, but no enemy, nothing. Then the sound of dripping. Every man froze again, ears straining, a steady drip, drip, drip against the stone floor. One soldier slowly angled his lantern toward the sound, and there it was. Blood, fresh, a thin line trailing down the wall, still warm, still wet. The men backed away, weapons shaking in their grip. The lieutenant forced them forward, deeper into the corridor, though each step felt like stepping into a grave. His hands shook on the rifle stock, but he would not let them see his fear. "We stick together." Dawn set, break formation. They obeyed, but reluctantly, each man's nerves were stretched to breaking. Every shadow an enemy, every sound a death knell. And then the whispers returned. Not far away this time, not from the walls, but from behind them. "Miller, help me." It was his voice. The man who had been dragged away. "God, he's alive!" Harris cried. He raised his lantern and started toward the sound. The lieutenant grabbed him by the shoulder. "Stand down. That sip's not him." But Harris pulled free. eyes wide with desperation. "I heard him, sir. He sits alive." Before anyone could stop him, Harris sprinted down the corridor. The lantern swung wildly in his grip, throwing long shadows that danced like claws on the walls. "Private, get back here," the lieutenant roared. Then Harris stopped, just stopped. His body went rigid, the lantern light catching his face. His eyes were wide, unblinking, his mouth hanging open. "Harris," one of the men whispered. The lantern slipped from his hand, crashing to the floor, the flames sputtering out. In that instant of darkness, there was a sound, a wet, crunching snap. When another lantern swung toward him, Harris was gone. Only his rifle remained, lying neatly against the wall. The squad collapsed into shouting panic. "It's Sitz picking us off. We gotta get out. We gotta get out now." The lieutenant barked orders, trying to hold them together. "Hold the line, tight formation." But the prison didn't care about their lines. The walls began to groan, stone grinding against stone. Dust fell from the ceiling. Something massive moved within the structure itself, like veins pumping through a living body. One soldier raised his weapon at the wall as cracks split open in the stone. Out of the cracks oozed something black, thick, glistening and writhing. It poured across the floor like tar, dragging with it the stench of rot. The men stumbled back, rifles firing, bullets sparking against stone. But the black mass didn't flinch. It only grew. And then a shape began to rise from it. A figure. Tall, twisted, pale as bone, its limbs too long, its head tilted unnaturally to one side. Hollow sockets stared back at them, and when its mouth opened, the whispers poured out, dozens of voices, all the men they had lost, crying for help in unison. The soldiers broke into chaos. Gunfire thundered down the corridor, muzzle flashes, lighting the creature's gaunt form. But every shot went through it, like smoke. Then the thing moved. It didn't walk. It lunged, covering the distance in a blink. One soldier screamed as the pale arm swept across him, lifting him clean off the ground. His body slammed against the bars of a cell with bone-cracking force. The lantern dropped from his hands, shattering. The light died. Screams filled the dark, rifles fired blindly. Men shouted each other's names. And through it all, the whispers grew louder, until they weren't whispers anymore. They were laughter. The lieutenant dragged two soldiers into an alcove, shoving them against the wall. His chest heaved, eyes wild. He raised his rifle, but he didn't fire. What good would it do? The thing had vanished again. Silence. Then softly, right behind them, "Leave." The voice was Harris's, but Harris was gone. The soldiers turned, lanterns swinging desperately, but the alcove was empty. Only the stone, only the dark. The lieutenant pressed his back against the wall, rifle trembling in his grip. His men were gone. His command was crumbling, and deep inside he knew the truth. The prison didn't want them to escape. It wanted them to stay. The survivors stumbled forward, their breaths ragged, the echo of their boots chasing them through the endless corridor. Every man was pale, drenched in sweat, rifles shaking in their hands. They had lost too many already. Harris, Miller, and others, snatched by the dark as if the prison itself was feeding on them. The lieutenant's voice cracked as he tried to hold them together. "Stay close, no one splits off again." But his command carried little weight now. Fear had eaten through discipline. His soldiers weren't following orders anymore. They were running on instinct, on terror. Every step felt like a trap. The walls seemed to pulse with life, their damp stones slick with that strange black tar that seeped from cracks. The air grew heavier, hotter, as though the deeper they went, the more they were being swallowed by something alive. Suddenly, one soldier froze. He raised a trembling hand toward the wall. "Sir, look." There, carved into the stone, was writing. Dozens of names scratched deep into the wall with nails, knives, anything sharp enough to cut, names of men. Dates, words like help and trapped. One of the soldiers recognized a name. His face went white. "That's Sepp's my grandfather. Sepp's. He fought here in the war." The lieutenant gritted his teeth. "Keep moving." But before they could take another step, the wall shifted, slowly, impossibly. One of the carved names began to etch itself deeper, the stone groaning as invisible claws scraped across it. The name wasn't a dead man's. It wasn't from the past. It was one of theirs. The soldier who had just spoken. His name burned across the wall, letter by letter, as the man himself began to shake violently. His lantern fell, smashing against the floor. His body arched, bones cracking, his scream cutting through the prison like a knife. Before anyone could reach him, he was gone, swallowed by the stone wall as if it had opened just for him. His voice echoed for a moment, then silence. The squad broke into chaos again. One man fired at the wall, another dropped his weapon altogether and started praying. The lieutenant grabbed him, shouting in his face, "Pull it together. That SEP's what it wants. Fear. It feeds on it." But even he didn't believe his own words anymore. The corridors twisted and shifted now. Paths they had just walked seemed different. Corners doubled back on themselves. The layout was changing, alive, rearranging, like a maze built to trap prey. Every lantern flicker showed the walls moving just slightly, almost imperceptibly, but enough to know they were being herded. And then came the sound. Not whispers this time, pounding. From beneath their boots, a rhythmic, thunderous heartbeat that made the floor vibrate. Dust fell from the ceiling. The tar oozed faster, and the walls groaned as though something massive stirred beneath. The prison wasn't just cursed. It was alive. The lieutenant raised his voice over the pounding. "It sets a body, tumnit, some body. Don't you see? This whole place, it sets not just stone, it sets feeding on us." The soldiers looked at him in horror, but they knew he was right. Every missing man, every whisper, every name carved into the wall, it wasn't haunting, it was consumption. Suddenly, the ground beneath them cracked. A fissure split down the corridor, wide and jagged. As something began to push up from below, lanterns swung wildly. The men stumbling back as the floor buckled. Out of the cracks surged that same black tar, boiling and writhing, carrying with it bones, skulls, ribs, broken limbs, rolling across the stone floor like discarded scraps. One soldier screamed, opening fire into the mass. His bullets sparked uselessly. In response, a pale arm shot out of the blackness, impossibly long, its hands skeletal and clawed. It seized him by the chest and yanked him down into the fissure. His scream ended abruptly with a wet crunch. The men ran. Lanterns bounced, rifles clattered, their boots slamming against stone. The prison roared now, a low, guttural vibration that rattled their bones. The corridors shifted violently, walls slamming shut behind them, cutting off escape routes. One soldier tripped, crashing hard against the floor. Another tried to pull him up, but the tar surged beneath, forming a face twisted, hollow, mouth gaping. It latched onto the man's leg, dragging him screaming into the black until his body was gone. His friend's hands came back empty, slick with blood. The survivors pressed on, but the prison wasn't just chasing them anymore, it was toying with them. A head lantern light flickered against an iron gate. A way out. The men charged for it, hope blazing in their eyes. But as they drew near, the gate slammed shut with a deafening clang. Chains coiled across it like serpents, locking it tight. Behind them, the corridor rippled as something massive moved closer. The lieutenant shoved his last 3 men against the gate. "Get it open, now." They pulled, clawed, struck at it with rifle butts, but the metal didn't budge. The sound behind them grew louder. Wet footsteps, dragging, breathing. Something was coming. And then the air went cold. The men turned, lanterns trembling. At the far end of the corridor, a figure emerged. Not the pale creature they had seen before, but something far worse. A towering shape stitched from shadows and bone, its eyes burning with pale fire. It carried the faces of the men they had lost. Harris, Miller, all of them, stretching across its chest, their mouths open in eternal screams. The whispers began again, but this time louder, deafening, like a chorus of the damned. The lieutenant raised his rifle, his voice breaking. "We fight here. We don't run." The soldiers knew it was hopeless, but they raised their rifles anyway. Gunfire cracked down the corridor, muzzle flashes lighting the horror for fleeting seconds. But the thing didn't slow. It advanced steadily, each step shaking the ground, the whispers drowning out the sound of gunfire. The last of their lanterns flickered. One soldier dropped his weapon, his mind shattering. He turned toward the wall, clawing at the stone with his bare hands, screaming to be let in, anything to escape what was coming. The wall obliged. It split open, swallowing him whole. The others fired until their rifles clicked empty. The lieutenant drew his knife, defiant even as his men backed against the locked gate. The creature loomed closer, filling the corridor with its shadow. And for the first time, the prison spoke. Not in whispers, but in a single booming voice that rattled the stones. Stay. The lanterns died, and the screaming began again. The lieutenant's knife trembled in his grip, the blade catching what little lantern glow remained before the last flames sputtered out. Darkness swallowed the corridor, leaving only the sound. The thing's steady footsteps pounding like war drums, the whispers swelling into a symphony of torment. The three remaining soldiers pressed themselves against the locked iron gate, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. One muttered a prayer. Another sobbed quietly, trying not to be heard. The lieutenant clenched his jaw, forcing back his own fear. If he broke now, they were finished. Stay calm, he hissed, his voice barely above a whisper. We Sepp faced worse. We Sepp get through this. But even he knew those words were a lie. The air thickened, heavy with the stench of rot and iron. Then a faint glow appeared down the corridor. Not lantern light, but a sickly pale radiance. It pulsed from the creature's burning eyes, casting jagged shadows across the stone. Its form was clearer now, a body too large for the corridor. Its limbs stretched unnaturally long, its skin a patchwork of bone, flesh, and tar. Faces of the fallen writhed across its chest, mouths moving, screaming without sound. Lieutenant. One soldier whimpered. That's Sepp's Miller Sepp's face. Harris too. God help us. The lieutenant barked. Don, sit, look at it. Focus on the gate. But the men couldn't look away. The faces were alive, their lips mouthing words the soldiers could understand. Pleas, curses, warnings. One soldier swore he heard his mother's voice calling him from the creature's chest. Another heard his child crying. It was pulling their sanity apart, one by one. The lieutenant pressed his palm to the cold iron gate. Locked, but his instincts screamed that this wasn't an ordinary gate. He felt a rhythm within it, a pulse matching the prison's heartbeat. It sets alive too, he muttered. Then, with a surge of rage, he slammed the knife into the gate's center. The iron screamed, chains writhed like snakes, hissing as if wounded. The soldiers recoiled, shocked. As the gate shuddered violently, the knife buried deep into its flesh-like surface. Black tar oozed from the wound. Behind them, the creature roared, a guttural, bone-rattling bellow that shook the entire corridor. Dust fell like rain from the ceiling. The ground cracked beneath their boots. The lieutenant ripped his knife free, glaring at the tar. It can bleed. If it can bleed, it can die. Sir, we can't kill a prison, one soldier shouted, his voice breaking. Then we hurt it until it lets us out. The lieutenant snapped back. The soldiers, clinging to the last shred of hope, began hacking at the gate with bayonets and knives. Each strike sent a shriek through the corridor, the sound like metal screaming in pain. Tar poured thicker, dripping onto the floor, burning holes into the stone. The creature advanced faster now, furious, its claws raking across the walls. Sparks flew as stone shattered under its strength. The whispers rose to a deafening roar. Hundreds of voices all speaking at once, begging, laughing, threatening. One soldier, Sepp's mind cracked under the noise. He dropped his bayonet, covering his ears, screaming. They Sepper inside my head. I can Seppe, make it stop. The lieutenant grabbed him by the collar, slamming him against the gate. Fight it. That Sip's in order. But it was too late. The soldier's eyes rolled back and he collapsed to the floor, convulsing. His body twisted unnaturally, bones snapping, until he lay still. When the men looked down, his face was gone, peeled away, as though the creature had claimed it for itself. The lieutenant swallowed hard, forcing himself to keep moving. The gate finally gave way, a jagged hole tearing open in the iron, revealing a pitch-black chamber beyond. Cold air rushed out, carrying with it the smell of ancient decay. "Through! Move!" the lieutenant barked. The two remaining soldiers squeezed through the gap, their uniforms tearing against the jagged edges. The lieutenant followed last, dragging the convulsed soldier's rifle with him before the hole sealed shut behind them. They were plunged into a vast chamber, unlike anything they'd seen yet. The walls glistened with tar veins pulsing like arteries. The ceiling stretched impossibly high, vanishing into black, and at the center, rising from the floor, was something that froze them where they stood. A heart, the size of a tank, beating slowly, every thud rattling the chamber, sending tremors through the stone. Black ichor dripped from its surface, pooling at its base where bones floated like driftwood in a river. The soldiers could only stare, their sanity fraying. "My God," one whispered, This is the prison." The Lieutenant Sepp's jaw tightened. "No, this is what Sepp's keeping it alive." As if in response, the creature from the corridor appeared, forcing itself through the chamber's narrow entrance. Its body cracked and bent unnaturally to fit, its glowing eyes fixed on them. The whispers filled the chamber, a storm of voices screaming, mocking, begging. The lieutenant raised his rifle, though he knew it wouldn't set matter. He looked at the men beside him. "We end it here for all of them." The soldiers nodded weakly, their hands shaking, but they steadied their rifles. They fired. Bullets tore into the heart, black ichor exploding in sprays. The chamber roared, the ground convulsing violently. The creature howled in pain, staggering forward, its massive frame buckling as if the damage hurt it directly. The men kept firing, screaming now, pouring every round they had into the pulsing mass. The heart shuddered, its beats faltering, cracks split its surface, light seeping out, bright and blinding. But before they could finish it, the creature lunged. It moved with impossible speed, swatting one soldier aside like a rag doll. He hit the wall with a sickening crack, his body broken instantly. The last soldier screamed, charging forward with his bayonet. He stabbed the heart, plunging the blade deep into its surface. The heart shrieked, the sound tearing through their ears. Black ichor sprayed, covering him completely. The lieutenant tried to reach him, but the creature caught the soldier mid-strike, claws piercing his chest. With a roar, it hurled him across the chamber. His body landed in the ichor pool, where bones swallowed him whole. Only the lieutenant remained. His rifle was empty. His men were gone. The prison roared around him, shaking violently as if it were about to collapse. He turned back to the heart, its surface cracked in bleeding light. His knife was still in his hand. Breathing hard, his voice hoarse, he muttered, "If I said I'm going to die here, then so are you." He charged. The creature barreled toward him at the same time, claws outstretched. The lieutenant leapt, driving the knife deep into the heart's center. For a moment, everything froze. The whispers stopped. The heartbeat went silent. The prison itself seemed to hold its breath. Then came the explosion. Light erupted from the heart, blinding and searing. The creature let out one final deafening scream as its body tore apart, faces vanishing into the light. The chamber shook violently, stone crumbling, tar burning away in flames of white fire. The lieutenant was thrown to the ground, his body battered, his knife still buried in the heart. His vision blurred, his breath shallow. The last thing he saw was the heart splitting open, collapsing into itself, dragging the entire prison with it. And then darkness. Silence. When the light finally dimmed, the lieutenant opened his eyes, or thought he did. He couldn't tell anymore if they were open or closed. The world around him was nothing but ash-gray haze, drifting like fog in a graveyard. The chamber was gone. The walls, the floor, the prison itself, it had all vanished. He staggered to his feet, clutching his knife, though the blade was cracked down the center. His uniform was soaked in black ichor, but when he touched it, it dissolved into smoke between his fingers. His ears still rang from the explosion, but beneath that ringing came something else. Whispers. Not loud anymore, but faint, like embers of a fire refusing to die. The lieutenant's chest tightened. He spun around, searching the haze for shapes, for enemies, for anything familiar. But all he found were shadows, long, crooked figures drifting in the mist. He recognized some of them, faces of his men. Miller, Harris, the one who had collapsed in the corridor. Even the soldier who stabbed the heart. Their hollow eyes stared back at him, silent, accusing. "No," he rasped, backing away. "No, I destroyed it. I destroyed you." But the shadows didn't move. They didn't attack, they just watched. A sharp crack split the haze. The lieutenant spun toward it, and there, rising like a mountain, was the heart again. Shattered now, glowing faintly, pieces of it floating in the mist like broken glass. And tethered to it was the creature. But it was smaller now, weak, its limbs twisted and broken, its face a skull stretched thin with tar. Its once blazing eyes flickered, but they still burned into his soul. "You failed," it growled. Its voice layered with hundreds of voices. Men, women, children, his men, his own. The lieutenant gripped the knife tighter, though the blade was cracked nearly to dust. He shook his head violently, refusing to believe. "No, I ended you. This is just your death rattle. You can keep me here." The creature didn't move. Instead, it smiled. Its jagged mouth spread too wide, revealing endless rows of teeth. "You are here because you struck the heart. You fed it your will, your rage, your soul. You didn't end it, you became it." The lieutenant stumbled back, horror twisting his face. No, that's a lie. But the shadows began to close in. His men, their mouths open now, not silent anymore. They spoke in unison, voices hollow, broken. "You kept us alive by keeping it alive." The lieutenant dropped to his knees, clutching his ears. The sound tore through him, worse than the creature's roar ever had. He stabbed the knife into the haze itself, as if he could cut the voices apart. But the blade shattered completely, dissolving into ash. The creature dragged itself closer, bones cracking, its body half smoke, half flesh. It loomed over him, not as an enemy anymore, but as something else, something waiting. And then the whispers stopped. The silence was worse. The lieutenant raised his head, eyes wide, chest heaving. The creature extended its claw, not to strike, but to offer. "Choose," it said, voice a low thunder. "Die here with them, or live as me." The lieutenant's throat tightened. He thought of his men, their faces, their screams. He thought of the orders that had led them here. He thought of the prison itself beating like a heart in the dark. And he realized something. There was never an escape. This wasn't a prison built to hold men. It was a prison built to keep the curse contained, and by striking at its heart, he hadn't killed it. He had opened the door. His last breath left him in a shudder. He reached forward, not to fight, not to flee, but to accept. His hand touched the creature's claw. The haze collapsed. When rescue teams finally arrived months later, they found the prison abandoned. The structure was unstable, collapsing in on itself. Of the soldiers sent there, not one remained. But in the final report, one chilling note was scrawled in the margin of a soldier Sipsfield journal, recovered near the ruins. "The prison isn't gone. It wears a new face now." And though no one would admit it, those who stood near the ruins swore they heard something beneath the rubble. A heartbeat. Slow, patient, waiting,